Good morning, everybody. With me today, standing behind me, are Public Works Director Bob Stubbe, our Finance Director Stephen Curtis, City Attorney Paul Kratz, City Engineer Todd Fitzer, Construction Engineer Mike Kleffner, Finance Administrator Al Herrick, and that is it, who's here today with me. The conditions of our streets is a top priority for me and for our taxpayers. It falls under my commitment to improve the taxpayer experience. Better, safer roads are an important part of taxpayer experience. Our streets have been underfunded for at least 50 years. Since I have been mayor, we have resurfaced more than 750 lane miles of road. That's the distance between Omaha and Waco, Texas, to put that into perspective. But it is not good enough, and we need to do more. My job is to identify and study issues that need to be resolved and to present reasonable solutions to these issues. The condition of our streets is one of those issues. So today, I am going to recommend a $200 million bond issue for road rehabilitation, reconstruction, and new construction projects in Omaha. I am strongly convinced that this is the best way for the city to move forward. And I am eager to provide the public with the information that they need to make an informed vote on the May 12th primary ballot. We can stop the deterioration of our infrastructure, but it will take all of us to agree that it is worth the expense. The City Council and I could secure the funding without a public vote. However, that would be contrary to my long-held belief that major initiatives of the city should be voted on by those who are paying the bill. Last year, we consulted with a team of independent engineers to do a deep dive to evaluate our current street infrastructure and estimate the costs to develop the city's first pavement maintenance program. As always, public input and support are important to all of our work. In July, I started a series of public meetings that included 11 town hall meetings and multiple other meetings all over the city to present a roadmap to better streets. This was an analysis of our road infrastructure, what is needed to make long-term sustainable improvements, and how much it would cost. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. What we learned from our deep dive evaluation: the city should be spending $75 million annually to allow us to resurface about 250 lane miles of road every year. Currently, the city spends approximately $41 million a year and resurfaces approximately 125 lane miles a year. The figure $75 million is 5% of the value of our total street infrastructure, which is $1.5 billion. Therefore, we have an annual revenue shortfall of $34 million a year of what we should be spending on our roads. With the recommended level of funding of $75 million a year, every lane mile in Omaha could be resurfaced over the course of its 20-year average lifespan. This is a pavement maintenance program designed to prevent us from getting into the situation we are in now, where our roads are deteriorating beyond repair. Specifics of the bond issue are: a $200 million transportation bond issue would raise $40 million each year for 5 years, enough to cover the $34 million shortfall. It would require a mill levy increase to pay the bond debt. Based on current financial projections, the levy increase would be equivalent to approximately $35 a year for the owner of a $100,000 home. The estimate is based on 2020 financial projections, and we anticipate that this levy increase that would be required to pay the bond debt will be lower than the $35 a year. Other revenue options that we looked at included an increase in the wheels tax, sales tax, and property tax. Wheel tax and property tax could be approved with 4 votes of the City Council and without a public vote. Sales tax increase would require state law change. A bond issue is voter approved. If the voters say yes, we could start the work this year in 2020. Projects funded with bond revenue will include neighborhood and arterial streets in all 7 city council districts in every part of Omaha. We already have a preliminary list, which you have today, which we handed out, but that is basically just the first wave of the projects we are doing. The list you have today is about $80 to $100 million worth of projects, so that is the first phase. That's how we have prioritized the first phase, but that is only about $100 million worth of work. And remember, this is a $200 million bond issue. The plan also will include additional funding for unimproved streets. Without voter approval, we will continue to prioritize spending on road infrastructure, but we will never catch up, and the funding gap will continue to increase. So the next step would be the City Council must approve an ordinance to put the bond issue on the ballot. The first reading of the ordinance will be January 28th on the City Council agenda, which is next Tuesday. The public hearing will be February 4th, and the final reading and vote will be on February 11th. Keeping the taxes low as possible has been important to me, and we have lowered the tax levy twice. But so is providing services that the taxpayers expect and deserve. Omaha is a thriving city with an exciting future and greatly improving national reputation. Our city infrastructure must match our potential. Our citizens expect it, and they deserve it. And now myself or any of these folks behind me are happy to answer any of your questions.
Mayor, how long have you been planning to work something like this out? I know this past year, especially with all the snow that we had and all the resurfacing that had to be done, especially this past year, did that influence the immediacy of this decision?
We have really been working on this for a couple years, because I think if anybody has attended any of my town hall meetings in the last 6 years, I always say our streets have been underfunded for at least 50 years, and we see it. The issue is every year they get a year older. And although we are trying every year to put more and more in resurfacing of streets, about $12 million this year in resurfacing. When I was on the city council, we had about $2 million in the budget for the entire year for 5,000 lane miles of road. You can tell it's been so underfunded that we decided to not only work with the finance department and public works, but let's get all these other experts in and let them help us determine why our streets look the way they do, what we have been doing, what we need to be doing, how much it costs, and how to pay for it. And that's what we have done. I think the winter last year, the winter of 19, and the spring of 19 just really emphasizes the example of why we need this bond issue. Because we had such a bad winter, our streets literally exploded. We spent over $13 million on potholes in 2019. Over $13 million in potholes. And I can tell you, if this winter is just as bad as last winter, and it might be, those are all gonna pop out and we're gonna do them all over again. We are wasting taxpayer money by what we are doing now. It's just a Band-Aid solution. And what I think we really need is a long-standing, sustainable pavement maintenance program. Like I said before, if we had this additional revenue and we were spending $75 million a year, what that means is that every street could be resurfaced once every 20 years. And that is an average lifespan of a street. That's your pavement maintenance program, and we will not allow the streets to get into this condition ever again.
Was that the straw then that kind of broke, I mean, was that the ultimate catalyst to decide to go for this? Was last spring when the amount of money you were spending on fixing potholes, and, I mean, it's been going on for 50 years. I mean, previous mayors have just kind of kicked the can and keep on doing
And that's
this.
why we have the problem.
Yeah, exactly. So was that the ultimate decision, saying, okay, enough's enough, we gotta, do this?
That wasn't the ultimate decision at all, because if you look at my budget since I have been mayor, every single year we put more and more and more money in the resurfacing budget because we know we need it. We can't keep on ignoring the streets like have been done and underfunding them in the past. So we've recognized that for years, and we've been putting more money in it for years. I think last spring was just a great example and really emphasizes the needs, because that's what happens to our streets, and it'll happen again this year if we have the same kind of winter. So with this freeze thaw, that's what causes those potholes. They're popping out already. And it is truly a Band-Aid solution with what we're doing. And the only true solution is to get those streets rehabilitated, reconstructed, new construction, so this won't happen again. We are talking with this bond issue, not only concrete streets, but we're talking asphalt streets too. Because if you put a good asphalt street in a neighborhood and it's got good drainage and depending on the traffic, it could last 40 years. So this is not just concrete street too. This includes concrete panel replacement. That's rehabilitation. So there's a lot of improvements that we can do with our streets.
Because they also get some of those streets like in the Roxbrook neighborhood, I remember
The
speaking
unimproved-
earlier. Yeah, the ones that aren't even up to code, that were designed before they don't even meet city code right now.
The unimproved streets are included, would be included in this bond issue. And what I think we will just do is we will definitely add more money to the fund that the city has to help pay for the city's portion of those unimproved streets. But that has to be part of the bond issue, yes.
Will any of the money be spent on this, like with Orbit or with bike lanes or anything along those lines? Or is this all just purely for resurfacing the streets we currently have?
This is the streets. This is our pavement. That's what we are talking about with this bond issue. It does not include an Orbit. It does not include a streetcar. This bond issue doesn't include bike lanes. This is about long-term rehabilitation, reconstruction, new construction of the pavement of our streets. But it's important to point out here, Tom, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the bike lanes, the public transportation, that is all things that we are looking at to improve our city and to make our city connected. We have a complete street policy that addresses all modes of transportation, but we can't do any of those things on streets full of holes. You can't put a bike lane on a street full of potholes. So this is fundamental to everything else. We have to address this first.
Mayor?
Yes.
The unimproved roads, will the residents still have to pay a portion of that?
Right now, that's what our policy is. We are still discussing to come up finally with what we want to do with the unimproved roads. I will tell you right now that they are part of this though, and I know for sure we will put a lot more money in the fund that we have to help pay for the city's portion of the unimproved roads. We do, as you know, always in the past history, if the homeowner wanted to improve that street, it was 100% on the homeowner's backs. If they do it in Douglas County, it's still 100% on the homeowner's back. We are offering now for a street improvement district to pay 50. I think that the best solution would be right now is to just put a lot more money into that fund so that we could get a lot more of those street improvement districts and road maintenance districts done. But the final decision on how we're going to do the unimproved streets hasn't been made, but they will be part of this. And before the vote, we will have a definite answer for the taxpayers.
Do you hope to get more money into the fund so the homeowner pays less?
So that we are able to contribute more to get more done.
The streets that you've already picked out to target on this, in 5 years, there will be a whole other group of streets that haven't been surfaced that probably are going to need it then. Do you see this as actually being a continual bond that
Yes.
you don't have to keep on renewing every 5 years?
Yes, I do. And I think that's a good thing too. This would be a $200 million bond issue with a 5-year issuance, meaning that money will come in and guaranteed over the next 5 years if the bond issue passes. Does it mean in 5 years you would have to do another bond issue? Yes, it does. But that's not necessarily bad in my opinion, because then we can show the taxpayers that we did what we told them we were going to do. They will see the results of the efforts of our work. They will see the streets that we did with the first round of the 200 million. We would put it back on the ballot again and let them vote again for a second round. Now, the question you're going to ask is, will we have to raise the levy again to pay for the second round, so it would compound? And according to our finance department, in the model that we've used for years and years and years with our capital improvement plan and all of our general obligation bonds that we issue, no, it will not. It would be a one-time increase. That one-time increase is sustainable. So the net, because of a lot of issues, you got to think we're retiring old bonds, geo bonds, interest rates change. There's a lot of factors that go into that, but according to what we have done, this one levy increase for the first bond issue would be sustainable, and then we can let the voters vote every 5 years to keep this going. But I think it's a good thing to do that.
Mayor, 2 questions for you. One, how easy or hard was it to make the decision to put this to a public vote rather than you said, just getting city council's
Yes.
approval just by maybe increasing one tax?
It wasn't hard for me at all because I am one that does not want to raise taxes. We have lowered the tax levy since I have been mayor. That's very important to me. But like I said, it's also very important to provide good services. And if you talk to people, I talk to them in town hall meetings. The chamber has done surveys. Number one issue: potholes, potholes, and then potholes. Those are about the first three. So you have to balance out what the people are paying in taxes as well as the services we are providing. We don't have the amount of revenue coming in to spend the amount on the roads that we need to be. Basically, our money comes from state gas tax and it comes from the wheel tax. And we do not have enough money to have the $75 million a year. And that's why we keep on having this issue. So no, I don't want to raise taxes, but I think if we make it very clear to the public that if you have a $100,000 home, the max you would pay every year is $35 more a year. And we really feel strongly it's going to be less than that. We really feel like the first time we would have to raise the levy wouldn't be till 2022. But we could start using the bond dollar, the money that we were getting from the bond issue this summer. So we'll start seeing improvements this summer. And I think that people will have to evaluate, is this worth paying $35 more a year or whatever it comes to depending on the home you own, is this worth it to get our streets repaired? No, I do not want to raise taxes, but yes, I want the voters to decide. I don't want to make that decision myself. I've talked to every one of the city council members. I think, in my opinion, they are all on board with this because their thing that they told me too is they want the voters to decide. That's how it should be. Those that are paying the bill should decide.
Mayor, how long would it take to pay back a 5-year bond?
These would be 20-year bonds.
So it'd be 20 years to pay back.
GO bonds, right? GO bonds are usually 20-year bonds, street bonds. And these are street bonds. So again, in our press release, we give a list of what these will be paying for, but these will not be paying for pothole repair. These are not going to be paying for crack sealing. These are going to be paid for mostly rehabilitation, reconstruction, new construction, and that rehabilitation includes things like concrete panel repairs. I mean, so it's not all just redoing the entire street, but it does include neighborhood streets, collectors, arterial streets in every city council district in all parts of the city.
So you touched on earlier about using this all for the resurfacing and what you just mentioned. So does the future of public transportation here in the city hinge on getting this funding to have you talk about the resurfacing? That infrastructure has to be in place before any more goes into public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So would this delay any possibility?
Like I said, this is fundamental to everything else. I think a big growing city, people want public transportation. They want multiple modes of mobility. We are always looking at those who commute by walking, the pedestrians, bicycles, public transportation, automobiles. We have to look at everything because they're all connected. You can't look at a bike lane with looking at how it's going to affect the traffic. You can't look at putting a bike lane down Pacific Street without saying you're going to lose a lane of traffic or a sidewalk. It all has to work together, but this is fundamental to anything else. You just can't do those other things when the streets are out there exploding. And I think you all will agree with me, last spring, some of our streets literally exploded. You couldn't even ride on them anymore. We patched them up, but those patches are very temporary too.
Mayor, could you help me with the math? So it takes 20 years to pay off the bond. So is there going to be a time where we have those stacking up and we have to pay?
Well, again, every 4 or 5 years, the city of Omaha does bond issues, right? And there's 5 different kinds of bonds. There's street bonds, public facility bonds, public safety bonds, park bonds, and environmental bonds, sewer bonds. And the way we schedule those in the past is, instead of calling them stacking up, when we do the new bond issue, we base it on those bonds that are being retired. So a lot of that bond debt goes away. Like, for example, CHI, it's going to be paid off in 2027. I mean, that's a huge amount of more bonding capacity that we will have. So the way, I don't know, when you say they stack up, yeah, if you do another bond issue in 5 years, we will still be paying the first one off. That is correct. But at the same time, we're retiring other ones. And that's why we feel like we will only need one levy increase to pay for it if it keeps on going, if the voters keep on improving it every 5 years. And I think it's good that they will be able to see that we did what we said we are gonna do. Al, do you want to say anything else about the bonds?
Yeah, about stacking up and that type of thing. The city issues 20-year bonds, and we pay about 80% of those bonds off in 10 years. So as we're paying this 80% of our outstanding debt out, we're able to issue new bonds like this and resurface the roads and that type of thing. So we're paying off bonds really quick, and we're able to issue new bonds and do new projects with that.
Mm-hmm. That's why our bond rating is as good as it is too, wouldn't you agree, Al?
Right.
Because we do pay off a lot of those 20-year bonds early.
Yeah, we don't have any balloon payments, and we pay level principal payments as opposed to level debt service payments. And again, that allows us to pay 80% of the debt off in 10 years rather than have a lot of outstanding debt long term.
Speaking about our bond rating, will this additional debt affect that at all?
No, I mean, we have the bonding capacity for this.
Yes.
The bond raters really, they look at your debt, but they're really focused on how you manage your debt.
Again, just can I say one other thing? The bond raters, if you're raising taxes to pay the debt, that's exactly what they want you to do. They want to make sure that you have the will to pay back the debt, and so this will not hurt the rating at all.
Jeff?
I'm sure you're aware the Millard School Board just put a $125 million bond issue on the May ballot. Do you feel like the suburban voters there have an appetite for $325 million bond issues?
We'll find out. I mean, that's really all I can say. This issue is what I have heard, and I am out in the public all the time. Like I said, I have done 11 town hall meetings. I've talked to Rotaries and civic groups all over the city, the chamber. The number one issue we hear is the condition of our streets. I think it's important to everyone, and I think it's important to everyone all over Omaha. Individual school districts, they have to make their case for their bond issues, their individual bond issues. Millard is one area of the entire city. Schools' bond issues sometimes pass and sometimes they don't. But I think it's just important that we concentrate on this and let the voters make a decision. But we will be working over the next several months until the May ballot, really making sure that the voters are informed, know what we're going to do, know why we're doing it, know how much it's going to cost, know why it's important, and we're concerned with our bond issue now. But let Jeff, he has another question.
You say this has been underfunded for 50 years.
Yeah.
How did we get in a situation where we're fundamentally shorting our streets?
Because I think that past mayors and city councils just weren't putting in the amount of money annually for a pavement maintenance program. We are limited by the amount of money that we have had in the past from the wheel tax and the state gas tax. That is where most of our revenue comes in. The wheel tax brings in around $25 million a year, state gas tax about $45 million a year. But that's spread out and covers a lot of other things too, like snow and ice removal, traffic signals. I mean, a lot goes into that. And so I just think that in the past that there wasn't enough revenue coming in, and nobody has made really any move to really thoroughly evaluate like we have done, and to try to really get the experts to tell us, here's what we should be paying, and here is why, and here's what you need to do to really have a sustainable program that once every 20 years you come in and resurface those streets and you're not going to let them deteriorate. I can't answer the question by why past mayors and past city councils have done what they have done, but I certainly remember in 2010 I was in the city council and there was just a little over $2 million in the budget for the entire year for 5,000 lane miles of road for resurfacing. I mean, that's not a lot for this type of city. And so some of the older roads, they just let them go, patched them up. And this is why we are dealing with what we have now. Whether I'm mayor again or there's somebody else, there will be another mayor in this office one of these days. I do not want to leave this office when I do and leave the same issue that I had when I came into this office, and that these roads are deteriorating. Why? What do we need to do to fix it?
So, has the city grown too far?
Oh, I don't believe so. Not at all. I mean, I get that question that's asked to me a lot. Is the city growing too much to take care and to maintain the streets on the east side in the older part of the city? And because of our very aggressive annexation, and keep in mind when we annex, we know everything about that area. We know the acres of park, the lane miles of road, the condition of the roads. We know if there's any pending big road projects in that area. We study before we annex. But because we are annexing, we are growing, we are broadening our tax base, and that's why we have been able to do the things that we have done in Omaha. It benefits the entire city when we annex out west, because it brings in additional sales tax, property tax, and it broadens our tax base. So it has helped and benefited our entire city, the annexations that we have done.
Mayor, speaking of Millard, looking in southwest Omaha and stuff, basically kind of west of 156, south of Dodge, and I can just hear commuters basically growing up there. I know they say they're all for it, but why? And it's apples and oranges. It's something different. But why doesn't the city do anything to widen 156, 168, 180th, 192nd? They're 2-lane roads.
We are.
Before. I understand, but I'm just saying, playing devil's advocate, what is your argument when we speak to those and they say, that's nice, I wish they would widen 192nd, I wish they would widen 168, so that you don't have 20, 30-minute congestions?
I would say look at our capital improvement plan. That's a 6-year plan. And 168th and 156th and 180th bridge, well, that's a county project. Those are all in our 6-year capital improvement plan. I mean, that plan has street bonds in it, like I said before, and we have 6 years worth of work that is already in that capital improvement plan. One thing you have to remember with the capital improvement plan, and we will make sure people understand that, is a lot of these projects have federal funding involved in them too, that's in our capital improvement plan. And when people say, why is it taking so long for 168th? Well, and the simplest explanation is, well, there's been a lot of issues with that, but when the federal dollars come in on these certain streets, sometimes 80% is paid with federal dollars. We pay 20%. And so that's why we carefully plan our capital improvement plan. So if we get federal dollars in and we can spend our taxpayer dollars of 20% of that road, we wait until we know those dollars are coming in. 168th Street, north of Dodge, was done a year or so ago. 168th Street from Pacific or Poppleton, I guess it would be, down to Center, it's going to be done. Widened, medians, lanes widened, concrete, so it's being done. This is above and beyond what we already have in our capital improvement plan.
Have you talked to the governor about this? Because lowering property taxes is one of his prime issues this term, and you're looking to add to our property tax.
I am letting the voters decide, and isn't that the way it should be? And I'm talking to the governor tomorrow. I have a meeting with him. But you know what? We need to take care of Omaha. I'm the mayor of Omaha. I'm not the mayor of the state of Nebraska. And I need to take care of the city of Omaha. And this took a lot of experts to dive deep into what's going on with our roads. And I am going to let the voters decide. And that's how it should be.
You also said that you looked at other options of how you could fund this.
Yes.
Can the voter feel good about the fact that this would have the least impact on the average taxpayer, this property tax? Or would it have been cheaper on the average voter or spread it out over a gasoline tax or something along those lines?
I feel like this is the best. Number one, because the voters are going to approve it or not approve it. I think it's important, and we will also make sure the voters understand that if their total property tax bill that they pay, the school districts are 61.5% of that. The city of Omaha is 21.5%. That increase is only on our 21.5%. It's not on their whole property tax bill. So of our sliver, of our 21.5% that goes to the city of Omaha, that is the portion that would have a levy increase. So it's not your whole property tax. So I think we calculated your entire property tax bill, if this would pass,
It's about 1.5%.
would go about a little over 1%, 1.5%. And I'm like everybody else. I don't like higher taxes at all. But I think everybody in Omaha recognizes what has happened with our streets, and we are trying to come up with a solution. That's my job. Yes, Jeff? Go ahead.
Have you done any market research on this to already have an idea how the voters are going to react?
Well, I have done my own research from all of the town halls and all of the places that I have presented this presentation to, and I will tell you, it's of course it's unscientific, and that will all happen before the vote in May. But I will tell you, on everyone at the end of the presentation, I said if I put a $200 million bond issue, that would cost you, if you had a $100,000 home, a maximum of $35 more a year, would you vote yes? And the overwhelming majority raised their hand yes. North Omaha, South Omaha, all across the city, they said yes, they would. So that's my little unofficial poll.
Is that in addition to what Jeff was asking about with in Millard, their bond? Did that take into account when you did your unofficial poll?
Well, not everybody in Omaha lives in Millard.
No,
so.
but I mean, like when you did your poll in that area, when you talked to people there in your old district.
I never, with all the presentations that I've done, I have never dove into the school district bond issues and asked people what they feel about the school's bond issue, what they feel needs to be done with the school. That is not under my authority. I'm only concerned with what is under my authority, and that is providing good infrastructure for the citizens of Omaha that pay taxes to the city of Omaha. What goes on in the school district is really not what I am going around talking about.
So, as you point out, the city has a complete streets policy.
Yes.
And it calls for the city to consider all modes of transportation when it does a street project. So if you're doing a length of street, how can you not consider things like trails or bike lanes along that street?
Todd, I'll let you talk about it, but we do. But we do with all new developments too, because that is important, but it's all connected. We're not going to go back and retrofit every old neighborhood in Omaha. But like I said before, some areas, the connectivity of the bike lanes, we have been working on that. But some areas, they don't work. Like I said, you can't put a bike lane right down Pacific Street. You're going to take out a sidewalk or you're going to take out a lane of traffic. So you've got to consider how is that going to affect the traffic. So we evaluate all of those things. I'm going to let Todd talk because he's just dying to talk. Yes.
When you
Come
do
on,
a
stand up here.
street, the city's policy is that you have to consider these things. Are you saying that you will not follow that policy?
No.
Can I step in?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're mixing apples and oranges here. If you look at Crown Point, 78th Street, and several of the projects we're doing, 120th, which is being built this summer, those all have that infrastructure you're talking about. That was looked at from the beginning. There's bike lane connectivity, there's sidewalks, there's traffic calming devices. What the mayor's talking about here is if we go and resurface a street, so we got a 4-lane street today, and we go and resurface that street, we certainly look at that. But if there's not additional right-of-way being purchased, there's oftentimes not physically room to add a bike lane or additional facility to that street. It becomes a rehab or a restoration type of an effort. So it is looked at, and last year when we did our whole resurfacing package, we sat down with our planning department representing the bike community, and we looked at opportunities for all of those things and evaluated the costs associated with everything. It is always looked at. But in a lot of these cases, we're resurfacing a street and we're not going to add anything. It's just going to improve the quality of the existing pavement.
So you're saying for every street project that you will do over the course of multiple bond issues, there's not one where you could include a trail or a bike lane?
You want to repeat what you said?
That's absolutely not what I said.
No, he didn't say that at all.
If you go and look at Crown Point and you go and look at 120th Street, there are bike lanes on both of those facilities that are being constructed this summer. So that's those two just already occurring. We look at that on every project. We're doing a road diet on 24th Street and 30th Street in the next year that are both going to include bike lanes.
But those are projects that are not these kinds of projects. So what about these bond issue projects?
These are additional projects that will still follow our complete street policy.
But you're saying you will not do bike lanes on them?
No, we did not say that, Jeff.
So
we said where
then let
it
me
works.
clarify.
There
Will
are
you-
some roads where they will work, to provide connectivity, and there are some where they won't work. Even the biking community understands that. You want connectivity with your bike lanes, and where they will work, we look at them, and they are part of our policy. But what we said is some roads, they don't work. Bob Stubbe, you could come up too.
So-
Go ahead. Instead of whispering in his ear.
Yeah,
You,
so I'm gonna give you an example of what Todd mentioned with regard to like 24th Street and 30th Street. Those are projects that have some federal aid. They will have some bond dollars from our previous approved bond issue, and we will make those improvements that will incorporate bike lanes. So let's say 15 years down the road, that street needs to be resurfaced. We're going to incorporate the exact same thing in that particular road, and the potential is that we'll use these dollars to resurface that road in 15 years versus not having enough money to potentially have to resurface it in 20 or 25 years, which if we do it sooner, that improves the road to allow for the continual use of those other modes of transportation. So we're looking, as Todd mentioned, we're looking at really two different things. The 24th Street, the 30th Street, the Crown Points are more related to changing kind of the cross-section of the roadway, adding those additional amenities onto it. But once we do that, we also have to continue to maintain it. So in 10 years, if there's a bad panel in that particular section of roadway that has a bike lane on it, we want to have the funds available to repair that now versus having to just go out there and maybe fill a pothole. That's the difference between these two bond issues.
So what I'm hearing is, on these projects, you would not consider a new bike lane onto the side?
No.
We consider it today. Every time that we look at a roadway that potentially is going to be resurfaced, we're only going from curb to curb. When we do a preservation of the existing pavement, we're going curb to curb. And so we, as Todd indicated, we'll meet with planning department, say, are there roads that are proposed to be done, resurfaced, that are part of the bike transportation plan? Is there an opportunity to consider putting in a bike lane? And again, the majority of the time, we don't run into that situation. We do have in the past, Leavenworth being an example, west of 52nd Street, we reduced that down. We did a road diet. It's got a bike lane on there now. Those are the types of situations that we run into when we look at curb to curb, existing right of way, can we reduce it down?
Bob, can I ask you a question about
Yeah.
the bike lane on 24th, North 24th? Was it necessary to put one there because that street's not very wide and it's maybe a little more narrow? Plus the bike lane ends, it doesn't go anywhere. Are we planning to make that go further?
Are you talking about North 24th
North
Street?
24th
Yeah,
Street.
that's a first phase of an overall improvement
Okay.
to that area. In fact, Public Works went and was working with Creighton on, well, we've got several studies going on 24th Street. So there's a study going on through MAPA that's going to look at it from Chicago to Leavenworth. So that's from just south of Creighton to Leavenworth. We're working with Creighton from Chicago north all the way to Ohio. Part of that's already been done with resurfacing and restriping. And then there's a further study north of that, and part of that's already been implemented. So you're right, sometimes you build several blocks and it appears to kind of go nowhere, but it's simply the first phase of an overall plan is what it is.
Mayor, let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Okay, I'm a voter and I'm thinking, well, you know, I may as well vote for it because if I don't, she'll just go to the city council.
I'll just what?
You'll just go to the city council and get the money that way. So are you saying that?
That's a long shot. I'll just tell you that right now.
I'm-
That's not as easy as you think. I just don't go to the city council and ask them to
Okay, so
raise
when you talk to the
taxes.
city council, they weren't open to raising taxes, or I mean,
The city council overwhelmingly supports letting the voters make the decision. That's what they're, and let me explain this too. When I said for a bond, a street bond, that the average homeowner would pay $100,000 house, $35 a year or less, is what I said. If and that's to pay the bond debt, to bring in $40 million a year. If I would go to the council and say, I want you to raise property taxes to bring in $40 million more a year, that would have to raise about 11 cents to bring in $40 million a year rather than 3.5 cents. because that's just raising the property tax to get 40 million more a year. We are talking about raising it to pay the debt over a period of time. So it's a lot more affordable if you're paying bond debt over a period of time. And like what Al said, we typically pay those 20-year bonds off in 10 years. We pay them off early because we retire old bond debt. We manage our bonds very, very carefully. So to go to the council and say, I want you to raise the property tax, but I want you to raise it 11 cents to bring in 40 million more a year because that's what we need to close the gap, I don't think I'd get one vote, nor would I ever do that.
Okay, so if the voters say no, we're just stuck with crappy streets.
Well, if the voters say no, they have made the decision. And we always have November to try too, to see what the issues were. But I think if we have a very carefully planned campaign that we let everybody understand and we give them the information and ask their questions, I think that's what our responsibility and our job is. And then let people make a decision. If they decide that they do not want this bond issue to pass, we will keep on doing what we're doing, but I'm going to tell you, we will never catch up, and every year the roads are going to be worse, and that gap is going to just keep on getting larger. Can I ask, I'll go ahead and ask, but I wanted Mike Kleffner right here, I wanted him to come up just for a second and talk about this first phase that we gave you. I kind of want him to explain how we chose these and then what our plan is to prioritize which streets we will be doing. But
Actually, that's my question.
okay, good. Well, karma.
Like the mayor said, this is just the first preliminary phase of spending the funds. This is 80 to 100 million. The first list it basically goes through areas. This doesn't mean we would do the entire area. Basically, we do a strategic evaluation. Some roads will just do panel repair. Other roads would be full resurfacing. We'll do ADA ramps, those type of things when we're in those areas. The rest of them kind of go through and they list specific street segments, and those will be anywhere from resurfacing to panel repair.
So this is kind of the first wave. It's the first phase, is what he gave you today, to give you an example. So we want you to know that we are prioritizing and we are looking all over the city. But this is about 80 to 100 million dollars worth of work. Now, it's true too, we will not be able, undoubtedly, to do $40 million worth of work the summer of 2020. This will have to ramp up. So it's not going to be exactly the same amount every year, but I will say it will ramp up and we will be able to use all of those bond dollars, as well as the bond dollars that are already in the capital improvement plan.
If this were to get on the ballot and pass, how quickly would work start on
This summer.
On this summer?
Yeah, it could start, they're already making plans about what areas that we will start working on this summer, but it could start this summer.
Would you be able to get bids? I mean, turn around and get bids that quickly and everything?
You could ask the public works guys.
The goal is to basically put out contracts prior to the bond issue going to the ballot, and then have the contracts ready to go to council. If the bond issue passes, they'll be able, within the first couple of weeks, go right to council for passing, and then hopefully within a month or so after that. So within 6 to 8 weeks of the bond passing, we would be turning dirt on specific projects.
So basically taking bids contingent on the bond pass?
Yes.
And taking care of the roads with the bonds, this would be something that would go on every year.
And keep in mind that capital improvement plan is online. You can go on there now and you could look under the street bonds and you can look at all the projects that are already queued up to be done without this bond issue passing. This bond issue is really going to be concentrating on rehabilitating the streets, neighborhoods, arterials, collectors, all over the city. Other questions? Okay.
This is just phase one, like this.
This is about 80 to 100 million dollars worth of work. This is kind of our first
How much
phase.
a percentage of this would you say, just rough guess, would this be of everything that needs to be done? Is this like tackling the first 10% of everything of the city? Or
Wow, that's a question that
I
I'm
know,
not
it's
the
a math
best at
question,
answering.
but
I'll let one of these engineers answer.
I'll take a crack at that. It depends on when you say everything that needs to be done. If you're talking about all of our capital needs to widen every street and fix every bridge and do all that.
Everything that would fall under this, under this project.
Under this project for
Yeah.
just our rehabilitation.
That would cover the, yeah.
Well, I think as the mayor indicated, this allows us to do all of our streets every 20 years. So this first phase that you see here, this first bite at the apple, so to speak, about 2.5 years worth or so of that 20-year effort, give or take.
Okay. Thank you very much.